we have historians like Ramla Thapar, Ramakoti. These people they're historians, they are in the field, but they're not really known beyond the field. You became a rock star, cool historian, which made history cool for us.
No, I think one of the things that I still get is, including this morning, there was a talk here in Bangalore, and again, someone came and said, "Oh, I didn't realize you were this young." And I was like, "I've got grays on my beard now, not that young anymore." 9 years ago, I was young, I'll admit. And at that time, I think it caused a bit of a sensation that there was a 700-page book and essentially a scrawny, skinny 25-year-old standing next to it and saying, "Look, I wrote this." That I think worked a little bit to my favor because it created a certain kind of curiosity. Secondly, I think the topic was just fascinating. Although I was obscure, the subject itself was broadly obscure. The story was still quite compelling, and I think people connected to that story. They connected to the protagonist of the book, The Ivory Throne, Sethu, Lakshmi, Bayi, who died here in Bangalore.
That's
down this road.
That's going to be my next question, actually. The Ivory Throne, if we read it, it's not exactly about Sethu Lakshmi Bayi herself. It's about the life of Travancore royal family, the way the transition happened when the princely state of Travancore to her. Yeah. But the point of view, so to speak, is a woman at the center of it. Yeah. Even though, if we really look at it, it's a patriarchal way of life. Yeah. What made you pick it up from Sethu Lakshmi Bai's, Rani Sethu Lakshmi Bai's POV?
So at a personal level, I think, and I've said this several times before, I think being exposed from childhood to very interesting women, not just strong women, but interesting women. If I think about my mother, grandmother, sister, they're all strong women, but each is interesting and very distinct. They don't fit one mold at all. Very different characters, very different styles, very different personalities. And yet there is this strong, almost family component of strength, in each of these women. They handle things very differently, yet there's something about them that I was exposed to from a very young age. And I think that does play a role in thinking that, instead of looking at male protagonists, and again, there are all these dozens of Rajas in Travancore, they didn't excite me because none of them did anything outside the mold. They were Rajas, they lived as Rajas, they died as Rajas. This particular lady interested me because she's a queen of Travancore from the age of 6. From 6, she was the queen, where she'd walk into a room and people would stand up and bow to her. And then she dies here in Bangalore, almost 90, 89 years old, as a completely different woman. A non-entity, obscure, unheard of by anybody here locally, and is cremated in a regular crematorium like anybody's grandmother. That arc of her life, and even now when people struggle so much to give up power, when you've enjoyed that kind of power, especially in her case, it wasn't just power. People viewed the royal family as living gods. The Queen of Travancore was seen as a living goddess anywhere she went. In fact, her great-grandson told me that when his father married into the family, the father's mother told him, when you see the Maharani, remember 2 things, that there is God in heaven and then there's God on earth, and she's God on earth. That's how you must treat her. Because the mother-in-law was a very orthodox royalist. And that was the view that people had of royalty in those days. So even today, when people struggle to give up power and wealth and status and influence, to give up not just power and influence, but also that semi-divine aura that people had around you, and to come to a completely different place in your 60s, reinvent yourself, adapt to change, give up your palaces, see them become public institutions, governments acquired it, things are happening. For me, that arc and that internal journey was very interesting. All said and done, she was still a privileged woman. She still had money. She still lived perfectly well all her life. That's all there. But I think psychologically for me, that was a very fascinating thing. How do human beings adapt? And most can't, but some can. And how do they manage? What are the internal sort of journeys that they go through? What is the turmoil that they have to deal with? I think those questions really interested me very much at a very human level. Then, of course, I was aware that, women get the short end of the stick in history. They're either wives or mothers or these side characters or footnotes. Whereas in this case, she had been turned into a footnote, but I was convinced that her story had something more to offer and that I wanted to bring her back into the spotlight. And that's essentially what I set out to do. It took 6 years, but in the end, the Ivory Throne, I think, has delivered.